You mentioned something about, do cellular automata exist outside the human mind in our little offline conversation? Why is that an interesting question? So cellular automata, complexity, what's the relationship between complexity in the human mind and trees falling in the forest?
Infrastructure. So the CA, so when John von Neumann and Conway and Feynman were doing CAs, they're doing on paper.
CA is cellular automata.
Yeah, just drawing them on paper.
How awesome is that they were doing cellular automata on paper?
Yeah.
And then they were doing a computer that takes like forever to print out anything and program.
Sure.
People are not with the TikTok, kids these days with the TikTok don't understand how amazing it is to just play with cellular automata, arbitrarily changing the rules as you want, the initial conditions, and see the beautiful patterns emerge. Same with fractals, all of that.
You've just given me a brilliant idea. I wonder if there's a TikTok account that's just dedicated to putting out CA rules, and if it isn't, we should make one.
100%. And that will get
we have millions of views. I mean, like
millions. Yes. No, it'll get dozens.
Or just have it running. So look, I kind of CA. I love CAs. Sorry.
Yeah. No.
We just have to make one. I actually a few years ago I made some robots that talk to each other, chemical robots that played the game of Hex, invented by John Nash. Mm-hmm. By doing chemistry, and they communicated via Twitter which experiments they were doing, and they had a lookup table of experiments. And robot one said, "I'm doing experiment 10." And the other robot, "Okay, I'll do experiment 1 then."
And they communicated
via Twitter, and then
publicly or DMs.
Yeah.
Can you maybe quickly explain what the game of Hex is?
Yes, so it's basically a board, hexagonal board, mm-hmm. and you try and you color each element on the board, each hexagon, and you try and get from one side to the other, and the other one tries to block you.
Wait, how are they connected?
So what the robots?
It's a chemical.
Yeah, let's go back. So the two robots.
Yeah.
Each robot was doing dye chemistry, so making RGB, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, red, green, blue, and they could just choose from experiments to do red, green, blue. Initially, I said to my group, we need to make 2 chemical robots that play chess. And my group were like, that's too hard. No.
Too complicated.
Go away. But anyway, so we had the robot.
By the way, people listening to this should probably know that Lee Cronin is a amazing group of brilliant people. He's exceptionally well published. He's written a huge number of amazing papers. Whenever he calls himself stupid and is a sign of humility, and I deeply respect that and appreciate it. So people listening to this should know this is a world-class scientist who doesn't take himself seriously, which I really appreciate and love. Anywho, talking about serious science, we're back to your group rejecting your idea of chemical robots playing chess via dyes, so you went to a simpler game of Hex. Okay, so what else?
The team that did it were brilliant. I really take I think they still have PTSD from doing it, because I said this is a workshop. What I'd often do is I have about 60 people on my team, mm-hmm. and occasionally before lockdown I would say, I'm a bit bored, we're gonna have a workshop on something, who wants to come? And then basically about 20 people turn up to my office, and I say, we're gonna do this mad thing, and then it would just self-organize, and some of them would like, no, I'm not doing this, and then you get left with the happy dozen.
Yeah.
And what we did is we built this robot, and doing dye chemistry is really easy. You can just take 2 molecules, react them together, and change color. And what I wanted to do is have a palette of different molecules you could react combinatorially and get different colors. Mm-hmm. So you got 2 robots, and I went, wouldn't it be cool if the robots basically shared the same list of reactions to do, mm-hmm. and they said, because then you could do a kind of multi-core chemistry, like so you could have 2 chemical reactions going on at once, mm-hmm. and they could basically outsource the problem.
But they're sharing the same tape.
Exactly.
Okay.
So robot 1 would say, I'm going to do experiment 1, and the other robot says, I'll do experiment 100, and then they cross it off. But I wanted to make it.
That's brilliant, by the way. That is genius. Sorry.
Well, yeah. I wanted to make it groovier, and I said, look, let's have them competing.
Yeah.
So they're playing a game of Hex, and so when the robot does an experiment, and the more blue the dye, the more it gets the higher chance it gets to make the move it wants on the hex board. Mm-hmm. So if it gets a red color, is like it gets downweighted in the other robot. And so what the robots could do is they each play a move, and because the fitness function or the optimization function was to make the color blue, they started to invent reactions weren't on the list. And they did this by not cleaning, because we made cleaning optional. So when one robot realized if it didn't clean its pipes, it could get blue more quickly.
Yeah.
And the other robot realized that, so it was like getting dirty as well. And they
Unintended consequences of superintelligence. Okay, but
that was the game. And we
communicating through Twitter, though.
They were doing it through Twitter, and Twitter banned them a couple of times. I said, "Come on, you've got a couple of robots doing chemistry. It's really cool. Stop banning them."
Yeah.
But in the end, we had to take them off Twitter, and they just communicated via a server, because it was just, there were people saying, you can still find it, Cronin Lab 1 and Cronin Lab 2 on Twitter, and it was like, make move, wait, mix A and B, wait 10 seconds, answer blue,
I really find it super compelling that you would have a chemical entity that's communicating with the world.
That was one of the things I want to do in my origin of life reaction, right? Is basically have a reactor that's basically just randomly enumerating through chemical space and have some kind of cycle, and then read out what the molecule's reading out using a mass spectrometer, and then convert that to text and publish it on Twitter, and then wait until it says I'm alive. I reckon that Twitter account will get a lot of followers.
Yeah.
And I'm still trying to convince my group that we should just make an Origin of Life Twitter account where it's going blah, 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 and it's like, hello, testing. Yep. I'm here.
Well, I'll share it. I like it. I particularly enjoy this idea of a non-human entity communicating with the world via a human-designed social network. It's quite a beautiful idea. How we were talking about CAs existing outside the human mind.
Yeah. So I really admire Stephen Wolfram. I think he's a genius, clearly a genius. And trapped in is like a problem with being so smart is you get trapped in your own, mind, right? And I tried to convince Stephen that assembly theory wasn't nonsense. He was like, no, it's just nonsense. I was a little bit sad by that.
So nonsense applied, even if it applied to the simplest construct of a one-dimensional cellular automata, for example.
Yeah. But I mean, actually, maybe I'm doing myself a bit too down. It was just as the theory was coming through, and I didn't really know how to explain it. Mm-hmm. But we are going to use assembly theory in CAs in cellular automata. But what I was really curious about is why people marvel. I mean, you marvel at CAs and their complexity, and I said, well, hang on, that complexity is baked in, because if you play the game of life in a CA, you have to run it on a computer. Yeah. You have to do a number of operations, put in the boundary conditions. So is it surprising that you get this structure out? Is it manufactured by the boundary conditions? And it is interesting because I think cellular automata, running them, is teaching me something about what real numbers are and aren't. And I haven't quite got there yet. I was playing on the airplane coming over and just realized I have no idea what real numbers are, really. And I was like, well, I do actually have some notion of what real numbers are. And I think thinking about real numbers as functions rather than numbers is more appropriate. And then if you then apply that to CAs, then you're saying, well, actually, why am I seeing this complexity in this rule? Is it you've got this deterministic system, and yet you get this incredible structure coming out. Mm-hmm. Well, isn't that what you'd get with any real number as you apply it as a function, and you're trying to read it out to an arbitrary precision? And I wonder if CAs are just helping me. Well, my misunderstanding of CAs might be helping me understand them in terms of real numbers. I don't know what you think.
Yeah, well, the devil's in the function. Mm-hmm. It's like which is the function that's generating your real number? Like that, it seems like it's very important, the specific algorithm of that function, because some lead to something super trivial, some lead to something that's all chaotic, and some lead to things that are just walk that fine line of complexity and structure.
I think we agree. So let's take it back a second. So take the logistic map or something, logistic equation, where you have this equation, which is you don't know what's going to happen at n+1, but once you've done n+1, you know for all time. You can't predict it. For me, CAs and logistic equation feel similar, and I think what's incredibly interesting, and I share your kind of wonder at running a CA, but also I'm saying, well, what is it about the boundary conditions and the way I'm running that calculation? So in my group, with my team, we actually made a chemical CA. We made Game of Life. We actually made a physical grid. I haven't been able to publish this paper. It's been trapped in purgatory for a long time. But
you wrote it up as a paper, how to do a chemical formulation of the Game of Life. Which
we made a chemical computer and little cells.
And I was playing Game of Life.
With the BZ reactions. Each cell would pulse on and off, on and off, on and off. Yeah. We have little stirrer bars and we have little gates.
Yeah.
And we actually played Conway's Game of Life in there. And we got structures in that. We got structures in that game from the chemistry that you wouldn't expect from the actual CA. So that's kind of cool in that
because they were interacting outside of the cells somehow. Or
so what's happening is you're getting noise. So the thing is that you've got this BZ reaction that gives on off, but there's also a wake, and those wakes constructively interfere and in such a non-trivial way that's non-deterministic. And the non-determinism in the system gives very rich dynamics. And I was wondering if I could physically make a chemical computer with this CA that gives me something different that I can't get in a silicon representation of a CA where all the states are clean, because you don't have the noise trailing into the next round. You just have the state.
So the paper in particular, it's just a beautiful idea to use a chemical computer to construct a cellular automata, and the famous one of Game of Life. But it's also interesting, and it's a really interesting scientific question of whether some kind of random perturbations or some source of randomness can have a significant constructive effect on the complexity of the system.
And indeed, I mean, whether it's random or just non-deterministic, and can we bake in that non-determinism at the beginning? I wonder what is I'm trying to think about what is the encoding space. The encoding space is pretty big. We have 49 stirrups, so 49 cells, 49 chem bits, all connected to one another in like an analog computer, but being read out discretely as the BZ reaction. So just to say, the BZ reaction is a chemical oscillator. And what happened in each cell is it goes between red and blue. So two Russians discovered it, Belousov, Zapasinski. I think Belousov first proposed it, and everyone said, you're crazy, it breaks the second law. And Zapasinski said, no, it doesn't break the second law, it's consuming a fuel. and it's there's a lot of chemistry hidden in the Russian literature, actually, just because Russians just wrote it in Russian. They didn't publish it in English-speaking journals.
It's heartbreaking, actually.
Well,
but
it's sad, and it's great that it's there, right? It's not lost. I'm sure we will find a way of translating it properly.
Yeah. Well, the silver lining / greater sadness of all of this is there's probably ideas in English-speaking. Like, there's ideas in certain disciplines that, if discovered by other disciplines, would crack open some of the biggest mysteries in those disciplines. Like computer science, for example, is trying to solve problems like nobody else has ever tried to solve problems.
Yeah.
as if it's not already been all addressed in cognitive science, in psychology, in mathematics, in physics, in just whatever you want to, economics even. But if you look into that literature, you might be able to discover some beautiful ideas. Obviously, Russian is an interesting case of that because there's a loss in translation. But you said there's a source of fuel, a source of energy.
Yeah. So the BZ reaction, you have an acid in there called malonic acid.
Yeah.
And what happens is it's basically like a battery that powers it. And it loses CO2, so decarboxylates. It's just a chemical reaction. What that means we have to do is continuously feed, or we just keep the BZ reaction going in a long enough time, so it's like it's reversible in time.
But only like, yeah.
Only like. But it's fascinating. I mean, the team that did it, I'm really proud of their persistence. We made a chemical computer. It can solve little problems. It can solve traveling salesman problems, actually.
Nice.
But like I say, it's
but not any faster than a regular computer. Is there something you could do?
Maybe. I'm not sure. I'm not. I think we can come up with a way of solving problems, also really complex, hard ones, because it's an analog computer, and it can energy minimize really quickly. It doesn't have to basically go through every element in the matrix, and flip it. It just reads out. So we can actually do Monte Carlo by just shaking the box. It's literally a box shaker. You don't actually have to encode the shaking of the box in a silicon memory and then just shuffle everything around. Yeah, and you.
It's analog.
So
It's analog. It's natural. So
I
it's an organic computer.
yeah. So so I was playing around with this, and I was kind of annoying some of my colleagues. I'm wondering if we could get to chemical supremacy, like quantum supremacy, and I kind of calculated how big the grid has to be so we can actually start to solve problems faster than a silicon computer.
Mm-hmm.
But I'm not willing to state how that is yet because I'm probably wrong. It's not that it's any top secret thing. I think I can make a chemical computer that can solve optimization problems faster than a silicon computer.
That's fascinating. But then you're unsure how big that has to be.
Yeah, I mean,
it might be a big box, hard to shake.
It might be exactly a big box, hard to shake, and basically a bit sloppy.
Did we answer the question about do cellular automata exist outside the mind?
We didn't, but I would posit that they don't, but I think minds can. Well,
so the mind is fundamental.
Sorry, so let's just go back. So, as a physical phenomena, do CAs exist in physical reality? Right? I would say they probably don't exist outside the human mind, but now I've constructed them. They exist in computer memories. They exist in my lab. They exist on paper. So they emerge from the human mind. I'm just interested in, because Stephen Wolfram likes CAs, a lot of people like CAs, and likes to think of them as minimal computational elements. I'm just saying, well, do they exist in reality, or are they a representation of a simple machine that's just very elegant to implement?
So it's a platonic question, I guess.
Yeah.
I mean, it's there's initial conditions, there's a memory in the system, there's simple rules that dictate the evolution of the system. So what exists? The idea, the rules,
Yeah. People are using CAs as models for things in reality to say, hey, look, you can do this thing in a CA. And when I see this, I'm saying, oh, that's cool. But what does that tell me about reality? Where's the CA in space time?
Oh, I see. Well, yeah. Right. It's a mathematical object. So for people who don't know cellular automata, there's usually a grid, whether it's one-dimensional, two-dimensional, or three-dimensional, and it evolves by simple local rules, like you die or are born if the neighbors are alive or dead. And it turns out if you have with certain kinds of initial conditions and with certain kinds of very simple rules, you can create like arbitrarily complex and beautiful systems. And to me, whether drugs are involved or not, I can sit back for hours and enjoy the mystery of it, how such complexity can emerge. It gives me almost like, people talk about religious experiences. It gives me a sense that you get to have a glimpse at the origin of this whole thing.
Mm-hmm.
Whatever is creating this complexity from such simplicity is the very thing that brought my mind to life. This me, the human, our human civilization. And yes, those constructs are pretty trivial. That's part of their magic, is even in this trivial framework, you could see the emergence, or especially in this trivial framework, you could see the emergence of complexity from simplicity. I guess what Lee, you're saying is that this is not, this is highly unlike systems we see in the physical world, even though they probably carry some of the same magic, like mechanistically.
I'm saying that the operating system that a CA has to exist on is quite complex.
Right. And
so I wonder if you're getting the complexity out of the CA from the boundary conditions of the operating system, the underlying digital computer.
Oh, wow. So those are some strong words against CAs then. I didn't realize.
Not against. I'm in love with CAs as well.
Right.
I'm just saying they aren't as trivial as people think. They are incredible. Yeah. To get to that richness, you have to iterate billions of times, and you need a display, and you need a math coprocessor, and you need a von Neumann machine based on a Turing machine with digital error correction and states.
Wow. To think that for the simplicity of a grid, You're basically saying a grid is not simple.
Yeah.
It requires incredible complexity to bring a grid to life.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
Well,
it.
then what is simple?
That's all I wanted to say. I agree with you with the wonder of CAs. I just think, but remember this: we take so much for granted what the CA is resting on, because von Neumann and Feynman weren't seeing these elaborate structures. They could not get that far.
Yeah, but that's the limitation of their mind.
That's exactly the limitation of their pencil.
But I think that's the question is whether the essential elements of the cellular automata is present without all the complexities required to build a computer. And my intuition, the reason I find it incredible is that, my intuition is yes. It might look different. There might not be a grid-like structure, but local interactions operating under simple rules and resulting in multi-hierarchical complex structures feels like a thing that doesn't require a computer.
I agree. But coming back to von Neumann and Feynman and Wolfram, their minds, the non-trivial minds, to create those architectures and do it and to put on those state transitions. And I think that's something that's really incredibly interesting, that is understanding how the human mind builds those state transition machines.
I could see how deeply in love with the idea of memory you are. So it's like how much of E equals MC squared, like, is more than an equation. It has Albert Einstein in it.
Mm-hmm.
Like you're saying, like you can't just say this is like the equations of physics are a really good simple capture of a physical phenomena. It is also has that equation has the memory of the humans.
Absolutely, yeah.
But I don't know if you're implying this. That's a beautiful idea, but I don't know if I'm comfortable with that sort of diminishing the power of that equation.
No, it enhances it.
Because it's built on the shoulders. It enhances it.
I think it enhances it. It's not, that equation is a minimal compressed representation of reality, right?
Yeah.
We can use machine learning or Max Tegmark's AI Feynman to find lots of solutions for gravity. But isn't it wonderful that the laws that we do find are the maximally compressed representations?
Yeah, but that representation, you can now give it as, I guess the universe has the memory of Einstein with that representation. Yeah. But then you can now give it as a gift for free.
Yeah,
to
it's
other
low
alien
memory.
Civilizations.
Einstein had to go through a lot of pain to get there, but it's low memory. So I say that physics and chemistry and biology are the same discipline. They're just physics, laws in physics. There's no such thing as a law in physics. It's just low memory stuff. Because you've got low memory stuff, things reoccur quickly.
Mm-hmm.
As you build in more memory, you get to chemistry, so things become more contingent. When you get to biology, more contingent still, and then technology. So the more memory you need, the more your laws are local.
Mm-hmm.
That's all I'm saying. And that the less memory, the more the laws are universal, because they're not laws; they are just low memory states.